You know, it's pretty wild how a single narrow strip of water can hold the entire global economy hostage. But with the Strait of Hormuz, the real crisis, the story everyone is missing, well, it isn't about oil. We're about to look at a hidden commodity that could have a way bigger impact on your wallet. So here's the situation. Iran has, for all intents and purposes, shut down the Strait of Hormuz. And of course, the headlines are going crazy, screaming about oil and gas prices. But you know what? They're completely missing the real story here. And that's exactly what we're going to dig into. But hey, before we get to the hidden story, we first have to understand the one that everybody thinks they already know. Okay, take a look at this. This is the Strait of Hormuz. It's the only way to get from the Persian Gulf, where some of the world's biggest oil producers are, out to the open ocean. At its narrowest point, it's just 33 kilometers wide. And because of its border, Iran basically has control over it. So when they decide to close it, boom, you get immediate, massive, global consequences. Now, just let this number sink in for a second. Every single day, 1/5 of the entire world's crude oil supply sails right through this tiny strait. It is, without a doubt, the jugular vein of the global energy market. And this number here, it shows you just how concentrated that risk really is. If we only look at the oil that's transported by ship, that number jumps to 31%. Think about that. A huge chunk of the world's most vital commodity is totally dependent on this one little sliver of water staying open. So, of course, the first thought is oil. It's the knee-jerk reaction, right? Experts are already predicting this huge price surge, and a disruption here doesn't just mean you pay more at the pump. It sends a massive shockwave through the entire global economy, hitting everything from manufacturing to just shipping stuff around. Okay, but this is where the story gets really interesting, because oil, as critical as it is, might just be one giant distraction from an even more fundamental crisis brewing under the surface. So you have to ask yourself the crucial question: what else is flowing through that street? What other vital cargo is passing through, completely unnoticed by almost everyone who's just staring at the price of crude oil? Well, the answer is this simple-looking compound called urea. And what is urea? It's a key nitrogen-based fertilizer. It's not an exaggeration to say it's one of the most fundamental building blocks of the world's entire food supply. Plain and simple, without it, crop yields would absolutely plummet. And this is the staggering number that almost everyone is missing. 1/3. A full 1/3 of the world's entire seaborne urea supply passes through the Strait of Hormuz. Just let that sink in for a minute. We're not just talking about fuel for our cars anymore. We're talking about the fertilizer needed to actually grow our food. And that right there is why the Hormuz closure is so much bigger than what the headlines are telling us. This isn't just a potential fuel crisis. This is a full-blown food crisis in the making. You know, when you actually compare the two supply shocks side by side, the situation for fertilizer looks way, way more severe. See, for oil, you've got some buffers. You've got pipelines that can bypass the strait. OPEC can just decide to ramp up production somewhere else. Governments can release their strategic reserves. But for urea, the alternatives are so much more limited. This isn't just a temporary distribution hiccup. The supply is being throttled right at the source. And that has a much more direct and, frankly, devastating impact on global food supply chains. And listen, this isn't just some theory. That's happening right now. We're already seeing the market react. Fertilizer prices have already shot up 25% since this all started. And you know where that cost increase is going, right? First to the farmers, and then inevitably to us at the grocery store. So what does this huge misdirection by the market actually mean for you as an investor? Where's the real opportunity when pretty much everyone is looking in the completely wrong direction? Well, here's the brutal truth. While most retail investors are chasing the dramatic, volatile headlines about oil, the smarter money understands that the real, sustainable repricing is happening in agricultural inputs. The fertilizer supply isn't just being disrupted, it's being structurally throttled. And that creates a powerful, long-term opportunity in a sector most people are completely ignoring. But acting on this kind of insight, it requires a totally different playbook. You can't just go out and buy any old fertilizer stock. You need a very specific strategy for valuing these kinds of companies right in the middle of a commodity crisis. And here is the classic trap that gets so many people. When commodity prices shoot through the roof, the companies in that sector suddenly look incredibly cheap, right? Their earnings explode, their PE ratios plummet, but it's all an illusion. You're valuing them at the absolute peak of a cycle, which often means they're actually the most expensive they'll ever be. So here's a much smarter way to approach this.
First, you identify the companies in these cyclical sectors. We're talking fertilizer producers like CF Industries or Nutrien. Second, and this part is absolutely crucial, you have to ignore the current sky-high fertilizer price. Instead, you normalize their earnings. You ask a simple question: what would this company earn based on the average price of urea over the last, say, 10 years? That calculation gives you a much truer picture of its value across an entire market cycle, not just during this temporary crazy spike. Ultimately, this whole crisis is a perfect lesson in looking past the obvious headline. Understanding these second-order effects, what I call the unseen cargo, that's what separates the noise from the real opportunity. So the next time a global choke point closes and the world starts to panic about the obvious commodity, ask yourself, what else is on that ship?